recording this. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kazua Berry, and my language is Kajua. I am the program manager at Big River Farms. Our program is located in Marina St. Croix. And today we are hosting this webinar to in partnership with Minnesota Farmers Market Association, MISA, and Minnesota Farmers Union. And the presenters will be speaking, but just a reminder, we have interpreters here. If you need interpretation, please click on the button down below that looks like a world or a globe that says interpretation to get into the language that you need. We have Swahili, Somali, Hmong, and Spanish. If you know of anyone who needs interpretation and does not have the right we don't have the language, please let one of us know and we can do a check-in with them at another time, but they are still welcome to join us. With that being said, I will give space to Jane.
Hello, welcome to this webinar about preparing to apply for help because of last year's drought. Drought relief means financial assistance. This webinar is about specialty crops, but livestock farmers are also welcome. Thank you, Kajua, for running the Zoom session and arranging for interpreters. That's a big job. My name is Jane Jewett, and I am from Minnesota Institute for Sustainable Agriculture. Our presenters are Stu Laurie from Minnesota Farmers Union and Kathy Zeman from Minnesota Farmers Market Association. Next slide, please. Other groups helping with this: Land Stewardship Project, Renewing the Countryside, Sustainable Farming Association, The Good Acre, Minnesota Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, and Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And now Stu Laurie will begin.
Thank you, Jane. And again, my name is Stu Laurie and I work for Minnesota Farmers Union. And today, Kathy Zeman and I will be talking about preparing to apply for drought relief. And we'll be covering two things that you'll need to prepare to apply. And those are a list of expenses and an IRS Form W-9. First, what is drought relief? It's financial assistance. So in essence, it's getting paid back for extra expenses you paid because of the drought in 2021. It is not for crop losses. For example, it's only for extra expenses. And it's important to know that you must have paid these extra expenses between June 1st, 2021 and May 22nd, 2022. So who is eligible for this drought relief, this assistance from the state? Livestock farmers and specialty crop farmers in all counties except Goodhue, Rice, Wabasha, and Winona are eligible to apply for this relief. those farmers need to earn $1,000 or more from their farm each year. A business or an organization that operates a farm can apply. And only one application per farm. So what expenses qualify? We're going to make a list of expenses. Again, it's only expenses that you already paid between June 1st, 2021 and May 22nd, 2022, and only expenses that were extra, additional, because of the drought that we had last summer. Let's go through some examples of expenses. This is a list provided by the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. It's just examples. If you have another expense, you can certainly list that so long as it was related to the drought. So example expenses related to irrigation. We have water tanks, water wagons or trailers, pipes, hoses, drip irrigation lines, nozzles and valves for irrigation, drilling a new well, installing a pump, and if you paid someone to help you do watering. Examples related to replacing a dead crop. So you had plants dry up, you replaced it during that time period. That could be expenses related to purchasing seeds, new seedlings, new starter plants. You can also list expenses related to paying people to help you replace that crop. So paying folks to till the soil, do that work of replanting, or hiring an advisor to help you through replacing that dead crop. The department's also laid out example expenses related to mulch. If you bought extra to hold moisture in the soil, that could be straw or hay, wood chips, plastic. And again, if you paid someone to help with the extra work of covering those plants to retain moisture, you can apply with that expense as well. And again, this list of expenses is not exhaustive. If you have an expense that was incurred due to the dry weather last summer, list it, and the department will decide whether or not it's eligible, but it's good to be inclusive. So as you're making this list, what records should you assemble? So you want to find and store receipts from buying those extra supplies that we just walked through. You also want a record of payments to people for doing that extra work because of the drought. This record could be a copy of checks you wrote to pay people for extra work, a screenshot of your bank statement, that sort of thing. And what if you're like me and you didn't save receipts from things you bought last year? You'll want to find a copy of the checks you wrote to buy those supplies, or list out what you bought and how much each thing cost, an itemized list, and write a short statement that these expenses are true and correct and sign it. Again, what if you paid folks in cash? There's no record of that. Make a list of who you paid, when, and how much, and write a short statement that these expenses are true and correct and sign it. So you've made your list, you've put together your documentation. What are you going to do with those records? You do not need to send those records into the Department of Agriculture. You'll basically say, these expenses are my expenses, and they'll take your word for it. You'll self-attest to those expenses. That said, you'll want to keep those records in case the Minnesota Department of Agriculture has questions later about the expenses. And you'll want to keep those receipts, those lists for at least 6 years, because the department, if you receive a grant, could ask for that list anytime within the next 6 years. And with that, and having covered listing your expenses, collecting documentation, and what to do with it, I'll turn it over to Kathy Zeman to talk about the second piece, which is preparing your W-9. Thank you.
Thank you, Stu. Kathy Zeman here, Minnesota Farmers Market Association. So the other piece of paper that will need to be submitted is called a W-9 if you want to apply for drought relief, the financial assistance, and you'll be filing that with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Next slide, please. This is what the form looks like when you download it or get a paper copy. And it's going to ask for your name and your tax identification number. Next slide, please. The W-9 form is from the Internal Revenue Service of the federal government. And these are screenshots of the form itself. So the first field that you will fill in is you're going to write your full name, the same that shows up on your tax return, into field number 1. Where the red arrow is. The next thing that you can write in is if you have a business name for your farm or your business. If you do, you can type it in field 2, and if not, just leave it blank. In the third box, it'll ask you to mark if you are an individual or sole proprietor. Click that X, and if not, you can click one of the other options. And the fourth section is if you clicked the individual and sole proprietor, you can leave that whole section on the right-hand side blank. It doesn't apply to you. Then you will put in section 5, your complete street address, where you get your mail. And it will, and in section 6, you're going to put your city, state, and zip code that go with your mailing address. And then section 7, your account number is optional. You can leave this section blank. The next section's part 1 is all about what tax identification number you are going to attach this income to. So if you are running your farm just as yourself, you're going to write in your social security number, and you would leave the next field blank. If you are a resident alien in the United States and you cannot get a social security number, you can use your individual taxpayer identification number, your ITIN, and you would enter that in the social security number box. If your farm is organized as a business and you have an employer identification number, EIN, you would put that number in the second box there and leave the top box, the social security number box, blank. And then since this is a legal document, you are going to read the certification that you are putting everything in here is true and correct, and then you're going to sign and date it. So what will happen with your information on the W-9 form? The Minnesota Department of Agriculture will use your name and your tax identification number from your W-9 form to send a report to the Internal Revenue Service. The drought relief payment is taxable as income, so the Internal Revenue Service will get a report that you were paid the drought relief money. Then in January of 2023, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture will send you a tax form that says how much money they paid you in 2022. You must count the drought relief money as income when you do your 2022 taxes. And you must send a copy of that tax form to the Internal Revenue Service along with your other tax documents. When can you apply for the drought relief money? The Minnesota Department of Agriculture will open the online application portal on Tuesday, June 21 of 2022, next week. The online application will be open for only 10 to 12 business days. And the Minnesota Department of Agriculture will accept mailed in applications as long as they are postmarked by the closing date. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture may open a second round of drought relief funding if there is budgeted money left after the first round. So it will be critical to get applying in the first few days when that opens on June 21. There is more help available. There will be one more webinar on how to apply for the drought relief money. It'll be on Wednesday, June 22, starting at 12 noon to 1:15. The webinar will be available in Spanish, Hmong, Swahili, Somali, and English languages. And we will put the link to apply to sign up for that webinar in the chat. And then the Good Acre and Big River Farms is putting on at least one drought relief application clinic at the Good Acre at 1790 Larpenter Avenue West, Falcon Heights, Minnesota, 55113. It will be Wednesday, June 29 from 4 to 7 p.m. And people will be there to help fill out applications. And we'll get more information to you as that becomes available. Okay, so questions and summary. Jane will upload this recording to the MISA website at that address, and we'll get that sent out to you in a follow-up email since you registered for this. And those are all the people that you can call or email to get help, to answer any questions. This concludes our slides. I think there are questions in the chat that we should grab.
Yes, I will read them, and then Stu or Kathy, or perhaps if there's a Department of Agriculture person on, could answer them. So question 1, do you envision any corn, soybean, or alfalfa farmers qualifying for payments?
I can answer that one, Jane. Corey, thanks for that question. No grain farmers, corn, soybeans, or alfalfa are eligible under the specialty crop definition. So folks who are eligible are livestock producers, including dairy, and specialty crop producers. And you can find the list of specialty crops on the specialty crop block grant program webpage at USDA that I've just linked in the chat. If you're a dairy farmer who raises corn and soybeans, you are eligible for a reimbursement if you bought feed or forage due to the drought. But you aren't eligible for losses or costs related to raising corn or soybeans. Thank you, and hope that made sense.
Thank you, Stu. Next question. Does this only apply if you applied for the relief program for last season? I'm not sure quite what that question means. The relief program that is opening next week will be for last season, for the 2021 season, because of the drought.
Jane, when that question was asked, it was asked during the when Kathy was going over the IRS and things like that.
Okay. Yes. Anytime you get a payment from a program like this, you would probably have to send in that W-9 form and get a tax form back.
Jane, this is Kathy. That ties in with that follow-up question. Is it separate from the FSA program? Yes, it is separate from FSA. There's no connection here between the two.
Okay,
You're welcome.
thank you. Is the $1,000 income requirement for net or gross? And that would be how a farm is defined. You're a farm if you have at least $1,000 in income.
That's gross.
Stu or Kathy, do you want to add?
Correct. It's gross. What the department's guidance has is $100,000 or more of agricultural products were produced and sold. So not income, but just $1,000 worth of products sold.
Yeah, $1,000. Stu, you said $100,000 the first time, but it's
Sorry.
$1,000.
A lot of bars of goat milk soap. And Sarah's got her hand up.
Sarah from Marble Seed has a hand up.
Thanks. My question is kind of confusing. So what if, in terms of the costs for labor and replanting work and mulching, what if you already had people hired for the season, a crew, but their time, extra time of theirs was spent doing that, thus taking them away from other work on the farm? Is there a way to kind of handle that, I guess?
That's a good question. Someone interrupt me if they've gotten direction specifically from the department. Jane, is your hand raising because you have? Or maybe that's someone else, excuse me. So my understanding is you would prorate that. So you would say this percentage of their time was spent replanting. And so I'm applying for this percentage of their time and that amount. And the key would just make sure that in your documentation to the department, it's clearly itemized and clearly documented. And what we do know from the department and what we've been sharing with folks is be inclusive in your expenses. Send them what you think could be eligible. Worst case, they send it back and say, no, we didn't have enough documentation to reimburse you for this. But be inclusive with what you list.
All right, there are two more questions in the chat, but Jane had a hand up first. So Jane, would you unmute and ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you so much. This is not a question. This is about the time. We were communicated that the meeting was going to start at 12:30. And that's why I don't see my people here, or most of them are not here because of the time miscommunication. So I'm guessing, are you gonna have another session of saying and put the time correctly so that most of the farmers who I farm with are not in here except Mumanyi only. So I think because of time, even though you send the email, you just said, most of us, we cannot get the information like you are explaining now. That is just a concern I wanted to put across.
Jane, this is being recorded. Will that work?
Correct.
Recorded in English, or do you need it in a different language as well?
Yeah, I can see you have Swahili. We can take that.
Jane, Jane, you say you're from Moses's farm? Or I think it'll be good for me to connect with you and Moses, and we can schedule either a time that we can have a Swahili interpreter go over this. So let's talk about that after, because we're almost at time right now. We promised we would be done at 12:30, and we have a couple questions to answer. So let's connect, Jane. I'm gonna put my contact information down, and can you give me a call?
Oh, okay.
Yes, hopefully we can get that squared away. That's really unfortunate. Okay, a couple more questions. Last year, I farmed in my backyard and had to purchase large amounts of city water. Would that be reimbursable?
Jane, I'll jump in. I don't know. That is not on the department's list of example expenses. But what I would say is document it and submit it to the department with your list of expenses. And unless we get better guidance before and see whether it's eligible, but we don't know for sure whether it is.
I would add to that, remember we've got a webinar coming up on June 22, and we can make sure that we cover that one in the June 22 webinar, which starts at 12 noon, right? Yes.
Yes. What is the closing date for this grant? We do not know the answer to that. That has not been released yet by the Department of Agriculture. Are these funds being distributed on a first come, first served basis?
So I can jump in on those two, Jane. So we don't know the closing date, but we do know that the department plans to keep the application open for 10 to 12 business days. So it's important that you get your application in a timely fashion. Those are business days, not days. So it's a little bit, it's around 2 weeks. And that will form the initial pool that's funded. So it's not first come, first serve for those first 10 to 12 days. It's important that you get your application in anytime in that window.
Thank you, Stu. I think that is the end of the questions. There was a question about more details for the livestock eligibility, and Stu put a link in the chat for that. But basically, it's the same principle. It has to be expenses that you paid that were extra because of the drought for anything for livestock.
So we are at 12:31, only a minute over. Kazua, do you want to wrap it up and let us out the door?
Yes, thank you everyone for coming to this webinar. We will be, again, it is recorded and Jane will post it on the MISA website. Looking forward to seeing you all next week. And if you can't make it to that workshop, join us at the Good Acres Clinic on the 29th from 4 to 7 p.m. Contact any of us if you have questions. Thank you guys, presenters, for helping out, and you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Please stay hydrated, drink water, take your breaks. Okay, it's gonna be really hot. Bye.
Thanks, Kazua.